Before you blink, before you scroll, before you assume this is just another rumor, stop. Because what's happening behind closed doors right now has fans absolutely stunned. Whispers are turning into full-blown questions, and the internet is buzzing with one uncomfortable mystery. Why is Rasheeda suddenly carrying the financial weight alone, and where does that leave Kirk Frost? It all started quietly, too quietly. A missed payment here, handled it myself, comment there. Then came the receipts, luxury bills paid, business expenses covered, family obligations met, with one name showing up again and again. Rasheeda's. Fans are shocked, friends are confused, and insiders are asking the question no one wants to say out loud: is Kirk even involved anymore? Emotions ran high the moment this story began to leak. Viewers noticed the tension in her voice, the tight smiles, the way certain questions were dodged instead of answered. And when Rasheeda was spotted covering a major expense without Kirk by her side, speculation exploded. Was this about control, trust, or something much deeper that's been simmering for years? Behind the scenes, sources claim arguments got heated, voices were raised, and old wounds were ripped wide open. Accusations flew, loyalties were tested, and the family was left divided as friends allegedly took sides. Some say this is about independence. Others believe it's about survival. One thing is certain: this isn't just about money. It's about power, pride, and a marriage standing at a dangerous crossroads. And as the truth inches closer to the surface, one question refuses to go away: why is Rasheeda paying the price alone, and what is Kirk really doing while she holds everything together? The tension didn't explode overnight, it crept in slowly, the kind of quiet pressure that builds behind forced smiles and polite conversations. Insiders say it began with small decisions, little financial choices that Rasheeda handled without making a big deal out of them. At first, no one questioned it. She had always been independent, always been the backbone, always the one who stepped up when things got uncomfortable. But this time felt different. This time, the silence around Kirk was louder than ever, and fans were shocked when whispers started spreading that Rasheeda was paying for everything alone. Close friends noticed the shift before the public did. There were moments when Rasheeda would excuse herself from group dinners to take calls, her voice low, her face tight with frustration. When she came back, she'd brush it off, saying everything was fine, but emotions ran high behind those calm words. People around her could feel it. The energy was heavy, the laughter didn't last as long. And Kirk? He was there, but not really there. Always distracted, always stepping away, always letting Rasheeda handle the uncomfortable conversations. The first real crack appeared during what was supposed to be a celebration. A business milestone, something they had worked toward for years. Cameras weren't officially rolling, but everyone had their phones out, capturing moments, sharing clips, posting smiles. That's when someone asked a simple question about the loan tied to the business. The room went quiet. Rasheeda answered smoothly, explaining how it was handled, how the payments were made, how everything was covered. But Kirk didn't say a word. He didn't nod, didn't add anything, didn't even look at her. That silence sparked 1,000 questions. Later that night, sources say the argument was intense. Raised voices echoed through the house, doors closed hard, words said that couldn't be taken back. Rasheeda allegedly confronted Kirk, asking why she was once again carrying the load alone. Kirk fired back, accusing her of not trusting him, of taking control without letting him step in. The argument wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about partnership, about years of unresolved resentment finally boiling over. Friends claim Rasheeda reminded Kirk of promises he made, of moments when he swore things would be different. She listed expenses, responsibilities, sacrifices. Kirk reportedly shot back with accusations of his own, claiming he was being pushed out, sidelined, made to look irrelevant. Emotions ran high as both of them dug into old wounds, bringing up past betrayals, broken trust, and the lingering scars that never fully healed. By morning, the damage was done. Rasheeda went about her day like nothing happened, but those closest to her could tell she was emotionally drained. She showed up to meetings alone. She signed documents alone. She made decisions alone. Fans started noticing too. Social media posts showed her grinding, working, smiling through exhaustion. Kirk appeared less and less, and when he did show up, the chemistry felt forced, almost scripted. The rumors grew louder when a major expense surfaced online, one that fans knew required both of them. Yet only Rasheeda's name appeared on the paperwork. Comments flooded in. Fans are shocked. Some praised her strength, calling her a boss who doesn't wait on anyone. Others questioned Kirk's role, asking why he wasn't stepping up. The internet did what it always does, dissecting every move, every glance, every caption. Family members weren't immune to the tension. Sources say relatives pulled Rasheeda aside, urging her to slow down, to think about herself, to stop carrying everything alone. Some supported her independence, while others worried about what this meant for the marriage. Kirk's side of the family allegedly felt defensive, insisting there was more to the story, that he wasn't as absent as people claimed. The family was left divided, each side holding on to their own version of the truth. Rasheeda, caught in the middle, tried to keep things private, but the pressure was relentless. Fans demanded answers. Friends whispered concerns. Business partners wanted reassurance. And Kirk? He reportedly felt cornered, frustrated that the narrative painted him as the villain. Behind closed doors, conversations turned colder. Less shouting, more silence. The kind of silence that says everything is wrong. One insider claims there was a moment when Rasheeda seriously questioned whether covering everything alone was worth the emotional cost. She allegedly sat with financial statements spread across the table, realizing just how much she had taken on without support. That realization hit hard. It wasn't just about the money. It was about feeling alone in a partnership that was supposed to be shared. As days passed, the distance between them became impossible to ignore. Public appearances were stiff. Interviews were carefully worded. Fans noticed the lack of affection, the missing spark. Speculation turned into full-blown theories. Was this the beginning of the end? Or just another storm they'd weather together? What no one knew yet was that this was only the beginning. Because while Rasheeda was quietly holding everything together, another revelation was looming, one that would push this already fragile situation to the edge. And when that truth surfaced, it would force both of them to confront a question neither was ready to answer. Was this marriage still a partnership, or had Rasheeda been standing alone all along? The pressure only intensified once the whispers turned into full conversations. What began as quiet concern quickly became unavoidable reality, and those closest to Rasheeda say she could feel the walls closing in. Every phone call felt heavier, every meeting felt longer, every smile took more effort. She was still showing up, still handling business, still paying expenses, but something inside her had shifted. The confidence was there, but the exhaustion was deeper than anyone realized. Around this time, Kirk allegedly started pushing back in subtle ways. Not openly, not directly, but through passive remarks and tense silences. Sources say he questioned why everything had to move so fast, why decisions were being made without him, why his input no longer seemed necessary. Rasheeda, already stretched thin, reportedly snapped back that she couldn't wait anymore, that things had to be handled whether he was ready or not. Emotions ran high, and once again, the argument wasn't really about money. It was about control, pride, and unresolved resentment. Friends claim there was a particularly explosive night when the conversation turned brutal. Rasheeda allegedly laid everything out, reminding Kirk of moments when she stepped up while he hesitated, when she carried the family through storms he didn't even want to acknowledge. Kirk, feeling attacked, reportedly accused her of rewriting history, of making him look like a failure in front of everyone. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Old betrayals were dragged back into the light, reopening wounds that never truly healed. The next day, Rasheeda showed up to work like nothing happened. Insiders say that's when they knew how serious this was. She didn't rant. She didn't vent publicly. She just worked harder. Business partners noticed she was sharper, more focused, but also colder. There was no room for excuses, no tolerance for delays. She was in survival mode. Fans watching from the outside praised her strength, but behind the scenes, she was emotionally drained. Social media only made things worse. Every post sparked debate. Every photo was analyzed. Fans are shocked at how distant Kirk appeared, how rarely he was mentioned, how often Rasheeda was photographed alone. Comments flooded in asking if she was single in everything but name. Others defended Kirk, saying people didn't know the full story. The fanbase itself became divided, mirroring the tension inside their marriage. Then came the loan. Insiders say this was the moment everything shifted from speculation to serious concern. The amount was significant, the kind of financial move that usually involves long discussions and joint planning. Yet sources claim Rasheeda handled it herself. Paperwork signed, arrangements made, payments scheduled. When Kirk found out, the reaction was reportedly explosive. He allegedly felt blindsided, humiliated, pushed out of his own marriage. That confrontation, according to sources, was ugly. Kirk demanded answers. Rasheeda demanded accountability. He questioned why she didn't trust him. She questioned why she should. The room was thick with tension, the kind that makes breathing feel difficult. Words like alone, burden, and resentment were allegedly thrown around, each one landing harder than the last. By the end of the night, neither felt heard, and both felt betrayed. Family members soon got involved, whether invited or not. Rasheeda's side reportedly urged her to protect herself, emotionally and financially. They reminded her of her worth, her resilience, her ability to stand on her own. Kirk's side, however, allegedly felt she was moving too independently, leaving no space for reconciliation. Family dinners became tense. Conversations were careful. The family was left divided, each side quietly choosing who they believed. Friends noticed Rasheeda pulling away emotionally. She laughed less. She trusted fewer people. Even those closest to her say she started keeping things to herself, afraid that anything she said would be leaked, twisted, or weaponized. Kirk, meanwhile, reportedly felt isolated, frustrated that everyone seemed to be watching his every move, waiting for him to fail. Then came the moment fans still talk about. During a public appearance, Rasheeda was asked a seemingly harmless question about balancing marriage and business. She paused, just for a second, but that pause said everything. She answered diplomatically, talking about strength and growth, but her eyes told a different story. Fans are shocked at how emotional she looked, how carefully she chose her words. Behind closed doors, sources say Kirk confronted her about that moment, accusing her of letting the world think he was absent. Rasheeda allegedly responded with a question that cut deep. "Where were you when I needed you?" That question reportedly ended the conversation. Not because it was answered, but because neither of them knew how to respond. As weeks passed, the distance became routine. They lived parallel lives, crossing paths without truly connecting. Business moved forward, bills were paid, appearances were made, but the emotional connection was fading. Rasheeda began questioning whether this was what partnership was supposed to feel like. Kirk questioned whether he still had a place in her world. What no one expected was the next twist. A close friend, someone trusted by both of them, allegedly stepped in with information that would shake everything. Whispers of hidden struggles, unspoken fears, and decisions made behind each other's backs began surfacing. Secrets that had been buried for years were suddenly coming to light. And as those secrets started to unravel, it became clear that the loan, the expenses, the distance, all of it was just the surface. Something deeper was broken, something that money alone couldn't fix. And as Rasheeda stood firm, carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders, Kirk was forced to face a truth he had been avoiding for far too long. Because the question was no longer why Rasheeda was covering expenses without him. The real question was whether there was still anything left to cover together, or if this marriage had already slipped into a quiet, painful ending neither of them was ready to admit. The secrets didn't come out all at once. They leaked slowly, like cracks spreading across glass, each one impossible to ignore once you noticed it. The close friend who allegedly stepped in didn't do it out of malice. Sources say they were tired of watching two people they cared about spiral in silence. What they revealed changed everything. Apparently, Kirk had been dealing with pressures he never fully shared, private setbacks that bruised his pride and made him withdraw instead of lean in. Rasheeda, on the other hand, had been quietly compensating for that withdrawal for years, telling herself it was temporary, telling herself things would balance out eventually. When this information reached Rasheeda, emotions ran high. Insiders say she felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. Anger that she had been left in the dark, and heartbreak that the distance she felt wasn't imagined. It was real. She confronted Kirk again, this time calmer but more devastating. She allegedly told him that silence can hurt more than betrayal, that being shut out made her feel invisible in her own marriage. Kirk reportedly listened, but listening didn't mean understanding. He felt exposed, stripped of the image he tried so hard to maintain. That conversation didn't end in yelling. It ended in exhaustion. Two people sitting in the same room, realizing how far apart they'd grown. Rasheeda admitted she stopped asking for help because she got tired of waiting. Kirk admitted he stopped offering because he felt like he'd already failed. Neither of them knew how to bridge that gap anymore. Outside their home, the noise only got louder. Fans are shocked as speculation exploded. Blogs dissected timelines. Commentators debated whether Rasheeda was too independent or simply forced into that role. Kirk's every appearance was scrutinized. A missed event here, a quiet moment there, all turned into proof of something being wrong. The narrative took on a life of its own, and neither of them could control it. What hurt Rasheeda most, according to sources, was the way people questioned her motives. Some accused her of wanting control, of pushing Kirk out intentionally. Those accusations cut deep. Friends say she never wanted to stand alone, she just refused to let everything fall apart. Every bill she paid, every loan she covered, every decision she made was about stability, not ego. Kirk, meanwhile, struggled with the public perception. Being seen as absent, as uninvolved, not at him. Insiders claim he started pulling away even more, feeling like nothing he did would change the narrative. That withdrawal only fueled more rumors, creating a vicious cycle neither of them knew how to stop. Family tensions reached a breaking point during a gathering meant to bring everyone together. Sources say what started as polite conversation quickly turned tense when the topic of responsibility came up. Subtle comments turned sharp, looks were exchanged. Someone allegedly asked why Rasheeda was still carrying everything on her own. Kirk reportedly went quiet. Rasheeda answered calmly, but the air in the room shifted. The family was left divided, not just by loyalty, but by unspoken truths everyone could feel but no one wanted to say out loud. After that night, Rasheeda made a decision. Insiders say she stopped explaining herself. She focused on what she could control. Her work ethic intensified. Her independence became non-negotiable. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. She was protecting her peace. Fans noticed the change. She looked stronger, but also more guarded. Less vulnerable. More distant. Kirk noticed too. Sources claim he finally realized how far she'd pulled away. Attempts to reconnect felt awkward, forced, like reaching for something that used to come naturally. Conversations stayed surface level. Laughter felt rare. When he tried to step in financially or emotionally, Rasheeda allegedly hesitated, unsure whether to trust consistency that came too late. The loan continued to loom over everything, a symbol of the imbalance they couldn't ignore. Every payment was a reminder of how much had shifted. Rasheeda didn't complain. She didn't dramatize it. But inside, she questioned whether partnership should feel this lonely. Kirk questioned whether he still knew how to be the partner she needed. Then came another twist. Insiders claim Rasheeda was offered an opportunity that would push her even further into independence. A move that could redefine her future, with or without Kirk. The offer sparked intense internal conflict. Taking it meant growth, security, and freedom. But it also meant accepting that she might no longer be building with him the way she once imagined. When she shared this with Kirk, the reaction was mixed. Pride, fear, insecurity, and admiration all collided. He supported her verbally, but sources say his discomfort was obvious. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, and neither of them knew how to navigate it. Fans are shocked at how openly strained things appeared by this point. Subtle gestures were gone. The warmth was missing. Every appearance felt like two individuals standing side by side rather than a united front. Speculation about separation grew louder, even though neither confirmed anything. The unanswered questions became the story. Behind closed doors, Rasheeda grappled with guilt. Not for succeeding, but for wondering whether she still wanted to fight for something that felt so heavy. Kirk grappled with regret, not just for what he did wrong, but for what he failed to do when it mattered most. Both were trapped between history and reality. As the months passed, it became clear that the issue was never just about money. The loan was a symptom. The expenses were a symbol. The real battle was about emotional absence, unmet expectations, and years of quiet compromise. Rasheeda had learned how to survive without support. Kirk had learned too late what that survival cost. And as they stood at this crossroads, neither knew what the next chapter would hold. Reconciliation felt uncertain. Separation felt terrifying. Staying the same felt impossible. One thing was undeniable. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone watching, waiting to see whether this story ended in healing or heartbreak. The turning point came quietly, not with an argument, not with tears, but with a realization that settled deep in Rasheeda's chest. Sources say she woke up one morning and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, clarity. Not peace, not happiness, but clarity. She knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine just because she was capable of handling it. Capability, she realized, had become her curse. Because every time she stepped up, it gave Kirk permission to step back. That day, she went through her routine like always. Meetings, calls, decisions, signatures. Money moved. Responsibilities were handled. But this time, she wasn't running on autopilot. Every action felt deliberate. Every choice felt heavy. Insiders say she started asking herself questions she had avoided for years. What happens if I stop covering everything? Who am I without the role of fixer? And most importantly, what happens to this marriage if I finally admit I'm tired? Kirk sensed the shift almost immediately. Something about her energy was different. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She was distant in a way that scared him more than any argument ever had. When he tried to joke, she smiled politely. When he tried to engage, she listened but didn't lean in. It was as if she had emotionally stepped back to observe instead of participate. That distance forced Kirk to confront himself. Sources say he began replaying moments in his head, moments when Rasheeda asked for support and he hesitated, moments when she carried the burden silently while he convinced himself things would sort themselves out. Regret hit hard, but regret without action only deepened the divide. Every attempt he made now felt late, like showing up after the house had already burned. Fans are shocked as subtle changes became impossible to ignore. Rasheeda started appearing more confident but less open. Interviews focused on growth, strength, and self-reliance. She avoided discussing marriage directly. Kirk, on the other hand, seemed restless, defensive at times, quieter at others. Their dynamic felt unbalanced, and viewers could feel it even through a screen. Then came the moment that insiders describe as quietly devastating. During a private conversation, Rasheeda allegedly told Kirk she didn't know how to let him back in. Not because she didn't care, but because she had learned how to survive without him. That truth hit harder than any accusation. Kirk reportedly sat in silence, realizing that her independence wasn't a choice anymore. It was a necessity she had grown into. That conversation didn't end with a decision. It ended with uncertainty. Kirk asked what she wanted. Rasheeda didn't have an answer. And that scared both of them. Because love without direction feels like standing still while everything else moves forward. Family pressure intensified as word spread that things were not improving. Some urged counseling, others suggested space. Opinions flew in from all directions, each one adding weight to an already heavy situation. The family was left divided, not just between Rasheeda and Kirk, but within themselves, unsure whether to push for reconciliation or prepare for separation. The loan, once just a financial detail, became symbolic of everything unresolved. Every payment date was a reminder of imbalance. Every statement was proof of how far things had drifted. Rasheeda didn't throw it in Kirk's face. She didn't need to. The reality spoke for itself. Kirk knew it. She knew it. Everyone knew it. Sources say Kirk tried to step up in visible ways, making gestures, showing effort, offering support. But consistency was the real test, and trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Rasheeda appreciated the effort, but appreciation wasn't the same as relief. She was still carrying the mental load. Still planning. Still anticipating problems before they happened. Fans are shocked when rumors began swirling about a possible trial separation. Nothing confirmed, nothing announced, just whispers. But whispers were enough. Social media exploded. Some fans supported Rasheeda wholeheartedly, praising her strength and independence. Others hoped for reconciliation, reminding everyone of their history, their growth, their past resilience. The audience itself became emotionally invested, projecting their own fears and hopes onto the situation. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda faced a painful truth. She still loved Kirk, but love alone didn't feel sufficient anymore. Love didn't pay emotional debts. Love didn't erase years of imbalance. Kirk faced his own truth, that good intentions mean nothing without follow-through, and by the time he realized that, the damage was already done. There were moments of connection, fleeting but real. Laughter over old memories. Shared glances that reminded them why they chose each other. Those moments made everything harder, because they proved the bond wasn't gone, just buried under layers of disappointment and fatigue. Letting go felt impossible. Holding on felt exhausting. The final twist, according to insiders, came when Rasheeda made a quiet move that spoke louder than any announcement. She restructured certain financial arrangements, securing her future independently. It wasn't a declaration of separation, but it was a declaration of self-preservation. When Kirk found out, he felt the weight of what that meant. She was preparing for any outcome, with or without him. That move sparked one last intense conversation. Not explosive, not dramatic, but raw. Kirk asked if she was already gone. Rasheeda replied that she was still there, but she couldn't promise forever if things didn't change. That honesty cut deep, but it was the first truly honest exchange they'd had in a long time. As things stand now, the future remains uncertain. Reconciliation is possible. Separation is possible. What's clear is that the dynamic has changed permanently. Rasheeda is no longer willing to carry everything in silence. Kirk is no longer able to pretend that absence has no consequences. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family remains divided as everyone waits to see what happens next. Because this story isn't just about a loan or expenses. It's about what happens when one person grows strong out of necessity, and the other realizes too late what that strength cost. And as the spotlight stays fixed on them, one question continues to echo louder than all the rest. When independence becomes survival, can partnership still exist, or does it quietly fade into something neither person ever intended to lose? Time didn't heal anything, it only exposed what had already been broken. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the emotional distance stayed exactly where it was. Rasheeda moved with purpose now, not urgency, and that difference mattered. She no longer rushed to fix what Kirk hesitated to face. She no longer filled silence just to keep peace. Silence, she learned, told the truth faster than words ever could. Kirk felt it every day. The house felt different, not empty, but unfamiliar. Routines changed. Conversations shortened. Even when they sat in the same room, it felt like two separate worlds existing side by side. He tried to convince himself this was temporary, another rough patch they'd eventually laugh about. But deep down, he knew this time was different. This wasn't chaos. This was calm. And calm scared him more than conflict ever had. Insiders say Kirk began reflecting on how he got here. Not just the big mistakes, but the small ones. The missed moments. The delayed decisions. The times he assumed Rasheeda had it handled without ever asking how heavy it was for her. He realized too late that reliability isn't proven in grand gestures but in consistency. And consistency was where he had failed her most. Rasheeda, meanwhile, was grieving something quietly. Not the relationship itself, but the version of it she once believed in. She remembered the early days, the teamwork, the shared vision. She remembered feeling supported, chosen, protected. Now, those memories felt distant, like scenes from someone else's life. She wasn't angry anymore. She was disappointed. And disappointment is harder to fight. Fans are shocked as her energy continued to shift publicly. She spoke more about boundaries, about self-worth, about knowing when strength turns into self-neglect. People praised her growth, but some worried about what it meant. The speculation never stopped. Every post, every interview, every appearance was analyzed. Was she preparing the audience for an ending? Or protecting herself in case one came? Family involvement reached another level when a serious conversation took place behind closed doors. Sources say both sides finally sat down, hoping to mediate what neither Rasheeda nor Kirk could fix alone. Emotions ran high, voices cracked, truth spilled out. Rasheeda spoke about feeling abandoned in moments when partnership mattered most. Kirk spoke about feeling ashamed, overwhelmed, and unsure how to ask for help without feeling weak. For a moment, it seemed like progress. Understanding replaced defensiveness. Empathy replaced accusation. But understanding doesn't erase damage. It only explains it, and explanation doesn't automatically lead to repair. The family was left divided on what should happen next. Some believed love was enough to rebuild. Others believed staying would only prolong pain. One night, after everyone had left, Rasheeda and Kirk sat together in silence. No phones, no distractions, just the weight of everything they hadn't resolved. Kirk finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. Do you still see a future with me? Rasheeda didn't answer right away. That pause said more than words ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but honest. I don't know who I'd be if I kept choosing survival over partnership. That answer shattered him, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He realized she wasn't threatening to leave. She was explaining why she might have to. Kirk admitted he didn't know how to be the man she needed right now, but he wanted to learn. Rasheeda admitted she didn't know if she had the energy to teach anymore. Fans are shocked as reports surfaced that counseling had been discussed seriously. Not as a storyline, not as a performance, but as a last effort. Sessions were tense, emotional, and revealing. Patterns emerged, roles were defined, the fixer and the avoider, the strong one and the silent one. Seeing it laid out that way forced both of them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. Rasheeda learned that strength without support turns into isolation. Kirk learned that silence isn't peace, it's avoidance. But learning doesn't guarantee change. And change requires time, patience, and vulnerability. Things neither of them were sure they still had. As the process continued, Rasheeda set clear boundaries. She stopped overextending. She stopped covering for Kirk emotionally. If he didn't show up, she didn't explain. If he hesitated, she moved forward anyway. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Kirk felt the difference immediately. The safety net was gone. The comfort of knowing she'd catch everything had disappeared. That forced him to step up in ways he never had before. To initiate, to plan, to follow through. Some days, it worked. Other days, old habits crept back in. Inconsistency became the biggest obstacle. Every step forward was followed by hesitation, and hesitation reopened old wounds. The loan remained unpaid in full, a lingering reminder of imbalance. Each payment date felt symbolic. Rasheeda never brought it up, but Kirk felt it hanging over every interaction. Money had become emotional currency, representing trust, responsibility, and presence. And right now, that balance was still off. Fans are shocked when Rasheeda was seen attending events solo again, confident and composed. Some called it empowerment, others called it distancing. The truth was simpler. She was learning how to exist without shrinking or overcompensating. Kirk watched from the sidelines, proud of her strength but terrified of what it meant for him. Then came the moment that changed everything again. Rasheeda was offered a long-term opportunity that required extended travel and deep commitment. It wasn't just business, it was a lifestyle shift. Accepting it would mean time apart, physically and emotionally. When she told Kirk, the room went quiet. He knew what this represented. Choice, independence, possibility. She asked him how he felt. Kirk answered honestly, scared, not of her success, but of losing her. Rasheeda nodded. She admitted she was scared too. Not of leaving, but of staying stuck. They both realized they were standing at a crossroads with no easy direction. No final decision was made that night. But something shifted. The truth was finally out in the open. No pretending, no minimizing, no performing. Just two people facing the consequences of years of imbalance. As things stand now, nothing is officially over, but nothing is the same. The future is uncertain. Reconciliation is fragile. Separation is possible. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family remains divided as everyone waits for clarity. Because this story isn't about drama for the sake of drama. It's about what happens when love exists without alignment, when strength replaces support, and when one person learns how to survive so well that partnership becomes optional. And the question still hangs in the air, unanswered and heavy. If Rasheeda no longer needs Kirk to stand strong, does Kirk still have a place beside her, or has the space between them already become too wide to cross? The waiting became its own kind of torture. not knowing which direction things would go, not knowing whether the next conversation would bring clarity or collapse. Rasheeda felt it every morning when she woke up and every night when the house went quiet. She wasn't crying anymore, that phase had passed. Now it was numbness mixed with resolve, a dangerous combination because it meant she was already adapting to a future she hadn't officially chosen yet. Kirk tried harder than he ever had, and for the first time, people around him could see it. He showed up earlier. He stayed longer. He asked questions instead of assuming answers. But effort after distance doesn't land the same way as effort during need. Rasheeda noticed the changes, but she also noticed how cautious she'd become. Trust no longer came naturally. It had to be evaluated, weighed, tested. One night, during what was supposed to be a calm dinner at home, the conversation shifted unexpectedly. Kirk asked her directly if she still felt married. The question hung in the air like smoke. Rasheeda didn't dodge it, she didn't soften it. She said sometimes she felt married in name only, and that honesty hit like a punch. Emotions ran high, but neither raised their voice. The calmness made it worse. Calm meant clarity. She explained that marriage, to her, meant shared responsibility, shared emotional labor, shared fear. Not one person carrying the weight while the other stood nearby. Kirk listened, jaw tight, realizing that love without action had slowly turned into burden. He admitted he'd been afraid for a long time. Afraid of failing. Afraid of not measuring up. Afraid that if he stepped fully in, his shortcomings would be exposed. So instead, he hovered on the edges, convincing himself presence was enough. Rasheeda responded with something that would later be repeated by insiders as a defining moment. She told him fear doesn't disappear when you avoid it, it just gets transferred to the person who shows up anyway. That sentence changed the entire tone of the conversation. Kirk finally understood that his silence had cost her more than any argument ever could. Fans are shocked when reports surfaced that Rasheeda had quietly consulted legal and financial advisors. Not to file anything, not to make announcements, but to understand her options. Knowledge became her shield. She wanted clarity, not drama. Kirk found out accidentally, and the hurt was immediate. Not because she was preparing to leave, but because she felt the need to prepare at all. That discovery led to another long night of conversation. Kirk accused her of already planning an exit. Rasheeda corrected him. She said she was planning for peace, no matter what shape it took. That distinction mattered to her. She wasn't running away, she was refusing to be unprepared again. The family reaction was immediate and intense. Some praised her foresight, others accused her of giving up too soon. Kirk's relatives worried she was closing doors instead of opening them. Rasheeda's circle reminded her how long she'd kept doors open by herself. Once again, the family was left divided, and that division only added pressure to an already fragile situation. Publicly, Rasheeda remained composed. She spoke about growth, about seasons, about choosing yourself without abandoning love. Fans dissected every word. Some felt inspired, others felt uneasy. Kirk, meanwhile, struggled with being seen as the reason she needed protection. The narrative weighed on him heavily, and for the first time, he stopped fighting it publicly. Silence became his response, not avoidance this time, but reflection. Then came another unexpected twist. Insiders claim Kirk finally admitted something he had never said out loud. He confessed that watching Rasheeda succeed so independently made him feel replaceable. Not jealous, but insecure. He felt like he was becoming optional in a life he once felt central to. Admitting that vulnerability broke something open. Rasheeda listened quietly, processing the irony. The very strength she developed to survive had become the thing that scared him most. She told him she never wanted to outgrow him. She wanted to grow with him. But growth without companionship had changed her. She was no longer willing to dim herself or wait in uncertainty. Kirk asked what he could do now. Rasheeda didn't have a simple answer. She told him consistency mattered more than promises, and time mattered more than words. Fans are shocked when the two were seen together again publicly, but the energy was different. No forced affection, no performance, just two people moving carefully around each other. Some interpreted it as progress. Others saw it as closure in slow motion. The ambiguity kept everyone watching. Behind the scenes, counseling sessions grew more intense. Patterns were challenged. Excuses were called out. Rasheeda learned she had used strength as armor, avoiding vulnerability because it felt unsafe. Kirk learned he had mistaken presence for participation. Neither liked what they saw, but both recognized the truth in it. There was one session, according to sources, that changed everything. The counselor asked Rasheeda what she needed in order to stay. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, it wasn't about money or control. It was about emotional reliability. Knowing that if she stepped back, things wouldn't collapse. Knowing she didn't have to be on guard all the time. Kirk was then asked what he needed to change. He admitted he needed to confront his fear of inadequacy instead of letting it dictate his absence. Leaving that session, neither felt relief. They felt exposed, and exposure can either bring healing or finalize endings. Over the next few weeks, Kirk made noticeable changes. He followed through. He showed consistency. Small things, but consistent things. Rasheeda noticed, but she also noticed how long it took for her body to relax. Trauma doesn't disappear just because behavior improves. The loan, still not fully resolved, remained symbolic. Kirk offered to take it over entirely. Rasheeda hesitated, not because she didn't want help, but because she needed to know it wouldn't come with resentment or inconsistency. Eventually, she agreed to a shared plan. Not a rescue, a partnership. It was the first tangible step toward balance in a long time. Fans are shocked at how quiet everything suddenly became. No leaks, no dramatic sightings, no cryptic posts. Silence replaced speculation. Some assumed reconciliation, others assumed separation handled privately. The truth was more complex. They were rebuilding slowly, cautiously, without guarantees. Rasheeda remained prepared for any outcome. Kirk remained committed to change, aware that effort didn't erase history. Both understood that staying together would require redefining everything they thought marriage was supposed to be. No roles, no assumptions, no silent sacrifices. As it stands now, nothing is finalized. Nothing is promised. But something has shifted, not back to what it was, but forward into something unknown. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family remains divided, but one thing is clear. Rasheeda is no longer covering expenses out of obligation. Every choice she makes now is intentional. And the biggest question still lingers, heavier than ever. When strength becomes independence, and independence becomes identity, can love evolve fast enough to keep up, or does it quietly get left behind while both people learn how to stand on their own? The quiet didn't mean peace, it meant caution. Every step forward was measured, every conversation intentional. Rasheeda wasn't rushing anymore, and that alone changed the power dynamic. Kirk felt it. For the first time, he understood that urgency had shifted. She wasn't trying to save the marriage at all costs. She was trying to protect herself while leaving space for him to prove consistency. Weeks passed without explosions, but without comfort too. Progress looked small from the outside, but inside, it felt monumental. Kirk began taking on responsibilities he had once assumed would naturally fall to her. Not as favors, not as gestures, but as obligations. Rasheeda noticed, yet she didn't celebrate. She observed. She needed to see if effort would last when no one was watching. Fans are shocked as the absence of drama became the story. People expected a breakup announcement or a grand reconciliation. Instead, they got silence. No cryptic messages, no emotional interviews, just two people moving carefully through uncertainty. The lack of spectacle made some uneasy. Others respected it, but everyone was watching. The emotional toll, however, hadn't disappeared. Rasheeda still carried years of hyper-independence in her body. Even when Kirk showed up, she stayed alert. Waiting for the drop, waiting for inconsistency. Kirk sensed that too, and it humbled him. He realized rebuilding trust wasn't about convincing her. It was about becoming reliable without expecting praise. There was a night when things almost unraveled again. A miscommunication, a missed expectation. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger old feelings. Rasheeda pulled back instinctively. Kirk noticed, and instead of retreating like he once would have, he stayed present. He apologized without defending himself. That moment mattered more than either of them admitted out loud. Still, fear lingered. Rasheeda questioned whether she was staying because things were improving or because leaving felt harder than staying. Kirk questioned whether he was changing for the right reasons or just reacting to the threat of loss. Both understood that intention mattered as much as action. Family pressure resurfaced as people grew impatient with the lack of clarity. Some demanded answers, others warned against dragging things out. The family was left divided again, not because of loyalty, but because everyone projected their own experiences onto the situation. Rasheeda stopped engaging. Kirk stopped explaining. This was no longer a group decision. Fans are shocked when Rasheeda finally addressed the situation indirectly. Not naming names, not confirming anything. She spoke about redefining partnership, about unlearning survival mode, about how strength can isolate you if you're not careful. The message resonated deeply. People felt seen, others felt exposed. Speculation reignited, but Rasheeda stayed grounded. Behind the scenes, Kirk struggled with shame. Not public shame, but internal. Realizing how much pressure Rasheeda had carried without complaint forced him to confront his own blind spots. He started therapy on his own, separate from couples sessions. Not to impress her, but because he recognized patterns he didn't want to repeat. That decision marked a quiet shift. Rasheeda noticed the difference, not because he told her, but because his reactions changed. Less defensiveness, more accountability, less avoidance, more presence. Still, she didn't rush to trust it fully. She had learned the hard way that consistency over time was the only real proof. The loan situation continued to evolve. Payments were shared, plans were adjusted. For the first time, Rasheeda felt like she wasn't carrying the full mental load. That relief surprised her. It also scared her. Letting go of control meant risking disappointment again. Kirk knew that. He didn't push. He let her set the pace. Fans are shocked as the narrative slowly shifted. The question was no longer why Rasheeda was covering expenses without Kirk. It became whether Kirk could truly sustain the role he was stepping into. Some believed people could change. Others believed patterns always return. The debate was relentless. There were moments of hope, shared laughter, genuine connection, moments where the past didn't feel so heavy. Those moments reminded Rasheeda why she stayed as long as she did. They reminded Kirk what he stood to lose if he slipped back into old habits. Yet uncertainty remained. Rasheeda still prepared for independence, not because she wanted separation, but because she refused to be caught off guard again. Kirk understood that now. He didn't see it as rejection anymore. He saw it as self-respect. The biggest shift came internally. Rasheeda stopped defining herself by how much she could endure. She began asking herself what she actually wanted. Peace, balance, reciprocity. Kirk stopped defining his role by proximity alone. He began measuring it by contribution. Fans are shocked at how real the situation felt compared to the usual spectacle. No villains, no heroes, just two flawed people facing the consequences of imbalance. Emotions ran high, but quietly. The family remained divided, but less vocal. Time had forced everyone to sit with discomfort. As months continued, one truth became undeniable. Whether they stayed together or not, the relationship would never return to what it was. Something fundamental had shifted. Survival had turned into choice. Dependence had turned into autonomy. And partnership, if it continued, would have to be rebuilt from the ground up. Rasheeda understood now that covering expenses was never the issue. Covering emotional gaps was. Kirk understood now that being present wasn't about being nearby. It was about being dependable. The story isn't finished. There is no final resolution yet. But there is clarity where there was once confusion. Boundaries where there was once silence. Honesty where there was once avoidance. And as fans continue to watch, one question still lingers, quieter but heavier than ever. When two people finally stop pretending, does that open the door to real partnership, or does it simply reveal that they've already grown in different directions? The realization settled slowly but firmly. Rasheeda understood that no matter how this ended, she had already crossed a line she could never uncross. She had seen what life looked like when she stopped waiting. She had felt the relief of not explaining herself, not justifying her exhaustion, not shrinking to make room for someone else's uncertainty. That awareness stayed with her, even on good days. Kirk felt that shift too. He could sense that she was no longer clinging to outcomes. She wasn't threatening to leave, but she wasn't afraid of it either. That changed how he showed up. Fear had once made him passive. Now fear pushed him toward accountability. He stopped asking what she needed in theory and started paying attention to what she responded to in reality. Consistency, follow through, presence without being asked. There were still difficult days. Moments when old habits crept in. Moments when Rasheeda caught herself bracing for disappointment even when none came. Healing wasn't linear, and neither of them pretended it was. The difference now was honesty. When something felt off, it was addressed instead of buried. When frustration surfaced, it wasn't weaponized. It was acknowledged. Fans are shocked when months passed without chaos. No explosive headlines, no dramatic exits, no tearful confessions, just quiet progress and quiet setbacks. Some lost interest without the spectacle. Others leaned in closer, recognizing something painfully real unfolding. The absence of drama didn't mean the absence of struggle. It meant the struggle had moved inward. Rasheeda began reclaiming parts of herself she'd neglected. Not just professionally, but emotionally. She allowed herself to rest without guilt. To say no without explanation. To imagine futures that didn't revolve around holding everything together. Kirk watched this evolution with mixed emotions. Pride, admiration, and a lingering fear of being left behind by her growth. That fear pushed him to confront himself in ways he never had before. Not to perform change, but to understand it. Therapy sessions dug into patterns rooted in pride and avoidance. He began recognizing how often he equated asking for help with failure. How often he withdrew when he felt inadequate. Understanding those patterns didn't excuse the past, but it gave him tools to interrupt the future. Rasheeda noticed the difference in subtle ways. Not grand gestures, but reliability. Calls returned when promised. Plans followed through. Emotional availability when conversations got uncomfortable. It didn't erase years of imbalance, but it softened the sharpest edges of resentment. Still, she remained cautious. Trust, once fractured, doesn't rebuild on intention alone. The loan, once a source of tension, gradually lost its emotional charge. Shared responsibility became routine rather than symbolic. Money stopped being the loudest reminder of imbalance. Instead, emotional labor took center stage. Who initiates difficult conversations? Who notices stress before it explodes? Who stays present when things feel heavy? Fans are shocked as Rasheeda's public messaging shifted again. Less about strength is survival. More about balance is freedom. She spoke about unlearning the idea that love requires self-sacrifice. About how partnership should feel like relief, not weight. The message resonated deeply, especially with those who saw themselves in her story. Kirk listened to those words differently now. Not defensively, but reflectively. He recognized how often he had benefited from her resilience without contributing to it. How often her strength had protected him from facing his own shortcomings. Acknowledging that didn't come easily, but it came honestly. Family dynamics slowly adjusted, the urgency faded, opinions softened. Some still believed separation was inevitable. Others saw hope in the consistency Kirk was building. The family was less openly divided, not because everyone agreed, but because they respected Rasheeda's autonomy enough to step back. There were moments when Rasheeda questioned whether staying was an act of faith or habit. Those moments scared her, but instead of ignoring them, she explored them. She asked herself whether she felt chosen now, not just relied upon. Whether partnership felt mutual, not assumed. The answers weren't always clear, but they were clearer than before. Kirk asked himself harder questions too. Was he changing because he wanted to be better, or because he feared losing her? Over time, the answer shifted. Fear might have sparked action, but intention sustained it. He began wanting change for himself, not just for the relationship. That distinction mattered more than he realized. Fans are shocked when a rare candid moment slipped through. Not an announcement, not a statement, just a glimpse of genuine connection. Laughter without tension, ease without performance. It reminded everyone why this story mattered in the first place. Because beneath the imbalance, there had always been real love. Still, love alone wasn't the finish line. Rasheeda knew that now. She refused to romanticize struggle. She refused to equate endurance with devotion. Kirk respected that boundary, even when it scared him. Especially when it scared him. Time continued to do what it does best. It revealed patterns. It tested consistency. It exposed whether change was temporary or foundational. Some days felt promising. Others felt fragile. Neither pretended certainty where there was none. The biggest change wasn't visible from the outside. It was internal. Rasheeda no longer measured her worth by how much she could carry. Kirk no longer measured his role by proximity alone. Both were redefining partnership in real time, without scripts, without guarantees. Fans are shocked. Emotions still ran high beneath the surface, but the chaos had been replaced by intention. The family remained quietly divided in opinion, but united in one thing. Rasheeda was no longer sacrificing herself to keep things afloat. As the story continues, there is no dramatic conclusion yet. No final verdict. Just two people standing in the aftermath of imbalance, deciding daily whether to rebuild together or release each other with honesty. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. Sometimes the biggest drama isn't betrayal or separation. It's the slow, quiet work of change, where love is no longer tested by survival, but by whether it can meet growth without asking one person to carry it alone. The emotional balance continued to shift in subtle but powerful ways. Rasheeda no longer entered conversations braced for disappointment, but she also didn't enter them with blind hope. She stayed present, aware, grounded. That groundedness changed everything. Kirk noticed that she wasn't trying to convince herself anymore. She wasn't selling optimism. She was observing reality and responding to it. There were days when Kirk showed up exactly how she needed. Proactive, thoughtful, emotionally available. On those days, Rasheeda felt something she hadn't felt in years, relief. Not excitement, not adrenaline, but relief. The kind that lets your shoulders drop without you realizing they were tense. It reminded her what partnership could feel like when it wasn't one-sided. But there were also days when Kirk slipped. Not dramatically, not destructively, but enough to remind her why she had learned to survive alone. A missed follow-up, a delayed response, a moment of avoidance when things got uncomfortable. Those moments didn't spark arguments anymore. Instead, they sparked reflection. Rasheeda would quietly note them, not to punish him, but to understand the pattern. Fans are shocked as insiders hinted that Rasheeda had stopped centering her decisions around the relationship entirely. Not out of spite, but out of self-trust. She began asking herself what aligned with her values first, then considering how Kirk fit into that picture. That reversal was critical. For the first time, she wasn't shaping herself around the marriage. She was allowing the marriage to meet her where she stood. Kirk felt that change deeply. It forced him to confront a hard truth. He was no longer guaranteed access to her emotional labor. He had to earn it through consistency. That realization was humbling. It stripped away entitlement and replaced it with responsibility. Some days, he rose to it. Other days, he struggled. But unlike before, he didn't disappear when he struggled. He stayed present, even in discomfort. That presence mattered more than he realized. Rasheeda began noticing that when things felt hard, he didn't retreat into silence. He asked questions. He acknowledged impact. He didn't deflect. Those moments didn't erase the past, but they softened its grip. Healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about no longer reliving the same wounds. Family dynamics continued to evolve in the background. The urgency to intervene faded as it became clear that Rasheeda was steering her own course. Some relatives still worried she was giving too much grace. Others believed she was finally receiving what she deserved. The family was less openly divided, but the tension hadn't vanished completely. It simply moved into quieter conversations and cautious observations. Fans are shocked as Rasheeda's public presence reflected her internal shift. She spoke less about endurance and more about discernment. Less about standing strong and more about standing aligned. People resonated deeply with that message. Many saw their own relationships reflected in her story, the invisible labor, the silent carrying, the slow awakening. Kirk listened to those conversations from a different place now. Instead of feeling attacked, he felt accountable. He began understanding how often he had benefited from Rasheeda's strength without recognizing the cost. That awareness was uncomfortable, but it also became fuel. Not for grand gestures, but for daily consistency. There was a moment, quiet and unplanned, that insiders describe as pivotal. Rasheeda had a stressful day, the kind that used to trigger her survival instincts. Without thinking, Kirk stepped in, handled what needed handling, and didn't ask for recognition. When she realized what he'd done, she felt something unexpected. Safety. Not dependence, but safety. It was a small moment, but it stayed with her. Still, she didn't rush to conclusions. One moment doesn't undo years. One good month doesn't guarantee a lifetime. She allowed herself to feel the relief without attaching promises to it. That restraint was new for her. It was the difference between hope and clarity. Fans are shocked when reports surfaced that Rasheeda had turned down an opportunity that would have pulled her completely away. Not because she felt obligated to stay, but because the timing no longer aligned with her priorities. That decision sparked debate. Some saw it as commitment. Others saw it as compromise. The truth was more nuanced. She chose based on alignment, not fear. Kirk recognized the weight of that choice. It wasn't made out of obligation. It was made out of discernment. That distinction mattered deeply. It made him understand that staying together was no longer default. It was intentional. And intention, once earned, could also be withdrawn. The loan, once the centerpiece of speculation, faded into the background. Not because it was resolved completely, but because it no longer defined the emotional imbalance. What mattered now was reliability, predictability, emotional safety. Rasheeda paid attention to how she felt in his presence. Not how things looked, but how her body responded. Tension or ease, vigilance or rest. Fans are shocked as the narrative continued without a clear ending. No announcement, no confirmation, no closure, just life unfolding in real time. Some grew frustrated, others appreciated the honesty of uncertainty. Because not every story ends with a declaration. Some end with quiet decisions made daily. Kirk continued working on himself, not perfectly, but persistently. Rasheeda continued honoring her boundaries, not rigidly, but firmly. Neither pretended the past didn't exist. They just refused to let it dictate the future without question. There were still moments of doubt. Moments when Rasheeda wondered if she was delaying the inevitable. Moments when Kirk feared that no amount of change would ever feel like enough. Those fears weren't spoken loudly, but they existed. Acknowledging them became part of the process rather than a threat to it. The biggest change was invisible to the audience. Rasheeda no longer feared being alone. Kirk no longer feared being fully seen. Those shifts altered the foundation of everything. Because when fear stops driving decisions, truth finally has space to surface. As time went on, it became clear that whatever happened next would not be a repetition of the past. Whether they stayed together or eventually parted ways, it would be with awareness, not avoidance. Choice, not obligation. Balance, not burden. Fans are shocked, emotions remained layered and complex, and the story continued without a neat conclusion. Because sometimes the most dramatic thing isn't a breakup or a reconciliation. It's watching two people unlearn survival, redefine partnership, and decide whether love can exist without one person carrying the weight of it alone. The rhythm of their days settled into something unfamiliar but steady. Not peaceful, not perfect, but honest. Rasheeda noticed how her nervous system responded now. Fewer moments of bracing. Fewer moments of scanning for what might go wrong. That didn't mean trust was fully restored, but it meant fear was no longer steering every interaction. That alone felt revolutionary. Kirk continued showing up, not loudly, not for applause, but in the quiet places where absence used to live. Appointments remembered, responsibilities handled, difficult conversations initiated instead of avoided. He still made mistakes. He still had moments where old instincts tugged at him. But the difference was accountability. He didn't disappear when confronted. He stayed present, even when shame surfaced. Fans are shocked as months passed without the collapse many expected. People kept waiting for a headline, a confirmation, a dramatic turn. Instead, they watched a slow evolution that didn't fit neatly into narratives of villain and victim. Some grew impatient, others felt seen, because real life rarely offers clean endings. Rasheeda began noticing how much energy she reclaimed by not overfunctioning. She stopped anticipating Kirk's needs, stopped buffering his discomfort, stopped translating his intentions for others. She allowed him to stand on his own. Sometimes he did, sometimes he stumbled, but those outcomes were no longer hers to manage. That boundary felt like freedom. With that freedom came grief. Not for the relationship, but for the years she spent believing strength meant silence. She allowed herself to mourn that version of herself without judgment. Healing, she realized, included honoring what survival had cost her. Kirk witnessed that grief with humility. He didn't rush to fix it. He listened. That restraint mattered. Family conversations grew less charged as time passed. The urgency to intervene faded. Opinions softened. Some relatives admitted they had underestimated the depth of what Rasheeda had been carrying. Others acknowledged Kirk's effort without erasing the past. The family was no longer loudly divided, but quietly cautious, watching for consistency rather than promises. Fans are shocked when Rasheeda declined to define the relationship publicly. When asked indirectly, she spoke about seasons, about growth that doesn't always announce itself. She refused to perform certainty she didn't feel. That honesty frustrated some and empowered others. But it stayed true to where she was. Grounded, observant, intentional. Kirk learned to live without reassurance. That was new for him. He had to trust that his actions would speak louder than explanations. That patience tested him, but it also matured him. For the first time, he wasn't doing the work to avoid consequences. He was doing it to become someone he could respect. There were setbacks, moments when old dynamics tried to reassert themselves, moments when Rasheeda felt the familiar pull to step in and overcompensate. Each time, she paused, asked herself whether helping would build partnership or reinforce imbalance. Sometimes she stepped in, sometimes she stepped back. The choice was conscious now, not automatic. Fans are shocked as the story continued without resolution. No engagement posts, no separation announcements, just two people navigating complexity in real time. Some called it dragging things out, others called it realism. The truth was simpler. Neither wanted to repeat the past by making decisions from fear or pressure. Kirk began to understand that trust wasn't something he could ask for. It was something he had to earn daily, without expectation. Rasheeda began to understand that independence didn't require emotional isolation. She could stay open without carrying everything. That balance was delicate, but it existed. There was a moment that crystallized everything. Not a fight, not a breakthrough conversation, just an ordinary day when something went wrong, and Rasheeda didn't automatically take control. Kirk handled it, fully, competently, without prompting. She noticed her body relax. Not because she needed him, but because she could rely on him. That distinction changed everything. Still, she didn't rush to conclusions. One moment doesn't guarantee a future. But it offered data, and data, not hope, guided her decisions now. Kirk sensed that shift. It kept him grounded, kept him focused on consistency rather than outcomes. Fans are shocked as speculation slowly lost momentum. Without drama to feed on, attention drifted. What remained were those who recognized the deeper story unfolding. A story about imbalance, accountability, and what happens when survival gives way to choice. Rasheeda continued building a life that didn't depend on anyone else's readiness. Kirk continued learning how to meet her there without asking her to shrink. Neither knew where this would ultimately lead. Reconciliation was still possible, separation was still possible, but whatever happened next would be rooted in truth, not fear. The biggest change was internal. Rasheeda no longer felt responsible for holding everything together. Kirk no longer felt entitled to be held. That shift altered the foundation of their connection. Whether it lasted or not, it was no longer built on silent sacrifice. As time moved forward, the question evolved. It was no longer why Rasheeda covered expenses alone. It became whether partnership could exist without one person carrying the weight. Whether love could adapt to growth instead of resisting it. Fans are shocked, emotions remained layered and unresolved, and the future stayed unwritten. But one truth stood firm. Rasheeda would never again confuse strength with obligation. And Kirk would never again mistake presence for partnership. And in that space between certainty and choice, the story continued. Not with a bang, but with intention. Waiting to see whether consistency could become character, whether healing could become habit, and whether love, stripped of survival, could finally stand on equal ground. Now it's your turn. After everything you've just heard, one thing is clear, this story is far from simple. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family was left divided, but the biggest questions are still unanswered. Was Rasheeda forced into independence, or did she choose it? Did Kirk step back because he couldn't show up, or because he didn't know how? And most importantly, can a marriage survive once one person learns how to stand completely on their own? You've seen the pressure. You've heard the whispers. You've felt the tension between strength and partnership. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Rasheeda was right to cover expenses without waiting on Kirk? Or should Kirk have stepped up long before things reached this point? Do you believe people can truly change when it counts, or is consistency after distance just too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation isn't over. Your voice matters here, and every opinion adds another layer to this unfolding drama. If this story had you questioning loyalty, power, and what real partnership looks like, make sure you hit that like button. It helps more than you think. And if you don't want to miss what happens next, because trust us, there are still twists ahead, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. This situation is still evolving, and when the next chapter unfolds, you'll want to be here for it. Stay locked in, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the biggest drama isn't what's said out loud, it's what happens when the cameras stop rolling.